Hi, I'm David Burton. I'm the director of the Grace Hudson Museum, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to our special 2021 virtual gala program. For those of you who aren't that familiar with us, the Grace Hudson Museum is operated as a partnership between the City of Ukiah, which owns the property, buildings, and collections and hires the staff, the Endowment Fund Board, which manages the museum's endowment portfolio, ensuring the future sustainability of the museum, and the Son House Guild Board, whose main mission is to raise vital funds for exhibitions, programs, wild gardens development, and marketing. The annual gala is typically the cornerstone of the Son House Guild's fundraising year, typically netting about 50% of the museum's programming budget. This year, the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic has once again forced us to cancel our live dinner and fundraising event. And so we have once again turned to producing a 1-hour live stream program. We'll be asking for your support tonight, but we'll also be presenting you with a diversity of artistic talent, from the visual arts to poetry, music, and the fine art of distilling fine spirits. Through the evening, we hope to demonstrate why the museum is important to the life of our community and the cultural community beyond. I'm delighted to say that many people have already made gala donations in the week leading up to the event. To you, we thank you for your generosity and foresight. For the rest of you watching tonight, and who want to make a donation, we have Diana at the museum ready to take your call. We should have a number, there you go, phone number there at the bottom of your screen. You can call that number and talk to Diana. You'll also see the website address for the Grace Hudson Museum, and you can go to the website on our homepage, scroll down, find the button to make a direct donation. And if you'd rather just focus on watching the program tonight, sit back, relax, make a donation after the program or in the weeks that follow. This year's gala theme is Curiosity, Creativity, and Community, which expresses 3 values that are very dear to the Grace Hudson Museum. We are a place that hopes to inspire lifelong love of curiosity, a curiosity for learning new ideas, subjects, and points of view. We are a place of creativity embodied by the poignant paintings of Grace Carpenter Hudson, exquisite pomo basketry created by master pomo basket weavers, and the diverse art of contemporary Mendocino County artists. And we are a place of community, bringing people together through a shared love of art, history, environment, and conversation. We built tonight's show around the artists who are featured in our current exhibition, 30 Years On, Leiden, Magruder, and Knight. We'll have video segments about each of the 3 artists made by museum curator Alyssa Bogue. We'll be joined by 2 of those artists, one through pre-recorded conversation and the other in person, to talk a little bit about their artistic journeys and inspirations. And we have with us tonight in studio Ukiah's current poet laureate and also one of Mendocino County's best guitar players. You'll also meet 4 members of the greater Ukiah community who have provided us with pre-recorded messages sharing their love of the museum and asking for your support. So let's get to it. Melissa Eleftherian Carr is the branch manager of the Mendocino County Library here in Ukiah. Recently, she was appointed the Poet Laureate for the city of Ukiah. We asked her to write a poem as a form of invocation in opening our show. After the poem, we'll talk a little bit with her for a few minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, Melissa Eleftherian Carr.
Thank you so much, David. I'm so honored to be here tonight. I love the Grace Hudson Museum, and I'm really grateful that it exists, and thank you. This is a poem I wrote especially for this occasion, so that would be considered an occasional poem, which I only recently relearned. It's called The Empress or Being With. Into wild open space, rigor fades. We're in the echo, sage and stone. We return to the trees to remember how to breathe. Beneath the red bud and over serpentinite, understory and mapped by its leaves, a cast of veins across our cheek. Awake and rippling with light, there at mountain base, blur of yellow across the sky, a single buttercup. Bright and waxy flowers, stems eaten fresh. The pomo gathered these seeds for pinole, left an offering. Acorns cast like stars on a path. Is it the right one? Toyon and tan oak, healed by the hush. Coast redwood, covered by your canopy. We have so much to learn. We add another curious layer. Wave of the sword fern. On the cusp of wisdom and will, we are summoned to withstand this virus, this mechanism of destruction, alienation, and catastrophe. Fear tries to eviscerate the heart of justice. It is a calling to breathe into the soreness, stoke the fire, take in what's broken, and salve its fractures. The work is ongoing. There is no prize but the self, which is a world of healing. Eye of curious bark, through wonder and meaning, tough wonder and meaning, might and bloom. Sedge of the gentle bristle heart, mycelial ancestor, hum to undo harm. Where we fold within, xylem and phloem constellate, mixing of absolute sugars, cob and thorn, gentle whistle of conifer. We are with the grasshopper, the reindeer lichen, the bee and opossum, citrine and jasper, apical meristem, the manzanita, a bird in profile about to ascend. To be with the folios, to be with the crustos, the sea star, cockle and abalone, angelica, amanita muscaria, to be with its sadness, to be with the gray willow, the California buckeye, blue elderberry, tarweed and madrone, valley oak and wild rose, the white-root sedge, Carex barbarea, how you continue, xylems and scars, white sage and black walnut, bulrush, Scirpus robustus, the dark rhizome, may you continue, dig roots in fall. In relation with the mountain yellow-legged frog, the alligator lizard, the rattlesnake, in relation with redwood, mixed evergreen, oak woodland, Douglas fir, chaparral, coastal scrub, grassland, and coastal strand, yarrow and thistle, sandstone and shale, a song and lyric both. We thrum and chortle, we are in and with, fold in and be with. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Melissa. You know, you're well known for interweaving science and nature into your poems. Could you tell us a little bit about what sparked your interest in that and how you started to weave that into poetry?
Yeah, absolutely. Curiosity would be the number one thing. I've always been attuned or curious about the natural world, and growing up in Brooklyn, it was a hard one. So being here in Mendocino County, I feel so much like it's an opportunity for me to learn so much more about native plants and species, and I can go hiking 5 minutes from my house, which is extraordinary.
Yeah. Your poem almost was like taking a walk through the wild gardens at the museum as well. And I know you spent some time there. Yeah. Alyssa, we're running a little tight right now. I'd love to have you back at the museum at some point for a poetry reading. So thank you for joining us tonight. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you so much, David. It's been a pleasure.
Okay. Our first video tonight is about the photographic art of Tom Lydon. Tom is a longtime resident of Mendocino County, dating back to the Back to Land movement of the late 60s and early 70s. Trained as a fine artist, he established quite a career in commercial photography, but never let go of his passion for creating art. Tom couldn't be with us in person tonight, so earlier this week we recorded a brief conversation which will immediately follow the video.
Tom Lydon's photographic work is highly attuned to form and color, melding his studies in painting with his training in commercial photography. Raised in Massachusetts, Tom achieved a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Painting at Alfred University. He created these 3 works as part of a show for his junior year there. During a scholarship-funded program at the Yale Summer School for Music and Art, a fellow aspiring artist encouraged him to explore the art scene in New York City. Tom went and took a job with a commercial photographer, gaining a skill set that would inform and define both his professional and artistic careers. In 1973, Tom and 2 friends left the East Coast for California. Together they bought land and built a homestead. To support himself, Tom worked for a commercial photographer in the Bay Area. He traveled across the country on assignment to places like Santa Fe, where he took this shot with his extra film. He called it Homage to Georgia O'Keeffe. Another day, after shooting models posed next to vintage cars for a clothing ad, Tom wanted to photograph the details of the car on its own. This image is entitled Buick. Both of these images appeared in the Grace Hudson Museum show An Association of 3 in 1991, alongside this image entitled Storm Cows. By the time Tom took this shot in 1986, he had his own studio in Ukiah. Driving to his homestead one night from work, this scene caught his eye. He balanced his camera on a fence post to capture cows as a storm approached. In his commercial studio, Tom took photos of wine, art, solar panels, and other local products. Through his work, he became involved with regional industries and joined several boards, many of which he is still a part of today. In honor of his community involvement, Tom received the Lifetime Community Achievement Award in the Arts from the city of Ukiah in 2011. As more of Tom's clients required digital images, Tom transitioned from film to memory cards, from the darkroom to the computer. Outside of work, Tom was mainly inspired to pick up his camera when he traveled on vacation, capturing thousands of images of new people and places. He shot these freshly painted vibrant walls in Barbados. When he was in Placencia and Belize, this small patch of a red curtain caught his eye. Tom also created new work for gallery and museum exhibits. For his second show at the museum, Tom experimented with designed compositions. In jelly beans, he arranged these colorful confections while softening the focus on pipe cleaners to make them look like spray paint. Tom used the same technique, keeping the pair in tight focus while softening the focus on the orange edge of a plexiglass sheet and towing the line. For a different exhibit at the museum, centered on Mendocino landscapes, Tom eliminated color altogether, with pieces like Light on Edge. The move to black and white surprised the exhibit curator, who expected colorful shots, for which Tom was known. More recently, Tom has scaled back his professional work and focused more on his fine art. Once he moved into town 7 years ago, he began to indulge a passion for collecting red-colored glass. The combination of their size, that they are printed on canvas, and the lighting on the glasses create the illusion that they could be paintings. Over time, Tom expanded his collection to include new colors, as you see here and here. At the start of the COVID pandemic, with the world locking down, Tom had time to explore a concept he had been thinking about for a while. In these works, he designed his own compositions, combining marbles and sticks with drawings and watercolor. He then captured these creations on film. Here, Tom takes the series one step further. After photographing and printing an image of watercolor and marbles, he placed a T-bird toy car on top of the print, which he then photographed, creating layers of media. Tom has once again synthesized the ideas of painting and photography.
Hi, we're standing in the galleries of the Grace Hudson Museum. In fact, the exhibition 30 Years On, Leyden, Magruder, and Knight, and I'm joined by Mr. Tom Leyden. Tom, thanks for hanging out with us for a few minutes.
Well, thanks for having me here. Yeah. Thanks for letting this show happen.
Tom, I want to start by asking you about how the beginnings of art in your life. How old were you? How did you get engaged? What mediums were you working with?
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, it goes way back to me as a very little kid, and I was into building things, and early on I had a little shop down in the basement. My dad had a little carpenter shop that he had set up there, and he made a little one for me, and so I was really into building things, and I always was interested in how things looked. And so then in high school, my high school art teacher encouraged me to continue with art. She felt I should go to art school and do something in that direction. And
were you painting and drawing?
Well, in high school art, you're doing a little bit of everything. And I also was interested in architecture, and at the time I thought maybe I wanted to be an architect. So I soon decided I didn't want to do that, but for a while I wanted to do that. So anyways, I ended up going to art school in upstate New York, small little university, Alfred University, and it was a perfect set. Perfect set about the school, small little rural area, the summer of between my junior and senior year, I got a scholarship to attend this Yale Summer School of Music and Art, which was a wonderful program put on by Yale University, and they accepted about 20 students from all over the country. It was really a wonderful thing. So spent the summer doing that with fellow students from all over the country that had all different approaches to art, and the faculty were all folks from New York City. They were practicing artists in New York. So that was my first influence with what New York was all about. And
well, having grown up in Western Massachusetts and gone to school in upstate New York, what was your first reaction to New York City?
Well, I was a little overwhelmed because also when I was in college, it was a rural situation, and growing up in Western Mass, it was a small city, Springfield, Mass. So it was exciting, and the wonderful thing is just the fact that I could be exposed to all this art there. It was just overwhelming, and also I got to know a lot of fellow artists early on being there. So it was that camaraderie. It was wonderful being with people. None of us had any money, but we all had a lot of energy and a lot of creative ideas. So it was. It very soon. I found the place very soon. Also, I had a job working for a commercial photographer in New York, and that's how the photography career kind of started, was from doing that. In college, I had no interest in doing photography at all, but it ended up in New York working with this photographer. It was kind of an interesting situation. I learned a lot about photography, and especially commercial product photography. So that's probably what stimulated the photo element.
Well, Tom, we have just a brief amount of time. I do want to, before you leave, I wanted to ask you about Wayne Knight. He was part of this exhibition. He passed away in 2009. What are some of your reflections on Wayne?
Oh, Wayne was a wonderful guy, and he was such a great teacher too. The students loved him, and he was his whole life basically. His son was named Matisse, and it was really his whole life. And I loved just hanging out with him and with Mac, and I've always wanted to make sure there was some kind of a tribute to Wayne after Wayne died, and this was the perfect tribute to Wayne. This really is like his second home in a way. So I feel really good about that, the fact that his stuff is hanging over there on the wall.
Well, and we're so happy that your stuff is hanging on the walls as well.
And I appreciate that very much.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
I am Laura Fogg. I have lived in the Ukiah Valley for my entire adult life, and I'm an artist. And during the pandemic, I created the Queen of Corona. She and I would like to encourage people to make donations to the Grace Hudson Museum. It's one of the most wonderful cultural institutions in our valley, and I especially like it because a lot of the shows include local artists. So please do make a donation if you can. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. And now I have the great pleasure of introducing one of my favorite Mendocino County musicians. Clay Hawkins is a wonderful guitar player, and I especially love when he plays his resonator guitar. You heard his music over the opening credits. Let's now enjoy a tune. Ladies and gentlemen, Clay Hawkins. right. Thank you, Clay Hawkins. That was awesome. And now it's my great honor to introduce Jack Crispin Kane, Tamar Kay, President and Vice President of Tamar Distillery, makers of Mendocino Spirits and a whole lot more lines of fine distilled spirits. Crispin, you, all the work of Tamar Distillery, it starts with you. You are a master distiller. And I'd like to know if you could tell us how you got started in the world of distilling and how it led to doing fine adult beverages.
Oh, sure, David. I began working in a winery in Pleasanton in 1983, and I decided to move to wine country in 1985. I moved up to Mendocino County. Been a cellar man and assistant winemaker. I worked at Hidden Cellars, and that got me connected with Germain Robin Brandy, where I had the great good fortune to work for Hubert Germain Robin and absorbed the traditional methods of distillation.
And Germain Robin, how long had he been doing what he was doing?
Many years. He came over from Cognac and began making brandy here in 1983, and I climbed on board their ship in about 1989. And he made brandy for years. It was absolutely wonderful.
Right. Tamar, how did you get involved in this enterprise?
Oh, Crispin and I met and quickly decided that we could make delicious things together. And I started distilling with Crispin in 1994. And we incorporated in 2005. So just good living in Mendocino County leads to good things.
All right. Well, let's get to your product line. I know you're very excited to introduce a new product line that you're branding Mendocino Spirits.
Yes.
Can you tell us about that?
Mendocino Spirits, the momentum behind Mendocino Spirits is to really highlight the artists of Mendocino County and the artistry of making fine crafted spirits. And we're working with the color mill in Fort Bragg to create the beautiful labels. And the Mendocino Spirits labels are done by Jeremy Logan. And so they're all locally crafted spirits with locally crafted art that emphasizes the beauty of Mendocino County.
And right now, the Mendocino Spirits line has a bourbon, a rye, a gin, and an aged gin.
We went backwards first. We have a 5-year aged gin, and we will have a London dry gin coming out for Mendocino Spirits. It will be our Mendocino Spirits dry gin. Crispin, do you want to speak on Mendocino Spirits?
Sure. The gin that's up and coming is really wonderful, and I've distilled botanicals, juniper berries, coriander, cardamom, and many other things, and some fine neutral grain spirits, and it makes a wonderful gin. The whiskeys are totally handcrafted. I have start with the fermentation, the distillation, the aging. I oversee every step of the way from the day we're mashing to the day we're bottling and out the door.
And our Low Gap bourbon has gotten lots of great awards, lots of double golds and golds, and recently the Captain Fletcher Rye was tallied amongst the top 10 ryes produced in America.
Well, now, you just mentioned the Captain Fletcher Rye.
Yes.
And that's a reference to the gentleman who's on the label.
Yes.
Correct.
Tell us a little bit about that. And you have a relationship with the Navarro, is it the Navarro Hotel?
It is the Navarro Restoration, Save Navarro Inn folks. We've been helping out their auctions for many, many years. And the restoration of the inn. And when we were rebranding with Mendocino Spirits, we wanted to focus on local ideas and local spirits. And so Captain Fletcher came to mind. And we are benefiting the restoration of the inn with the 2% of the proceeds from the Captain Fletcher Rye.
Well, I can tell community is a big part of what you guys do, in addition to making wonderful spirits. Crispin, about the aged gin.
Yes.
Now, this is something that I'm somewhat familiar with, but it's not very common to see aged gin.
It's starting to become more common with craft spirits, okay? The big production, probably not, but aged gin is something that people made centuries ago, before there was stainless steel tanks and large glass containers. People would make gin and put it in oak for storage, and it starts absorbing color from the wood. And the real trick is to choose some really great wood to put it in. And so I have aged this gin in fine barrels from Cognac, made of Limousin oak, and they're just really terrific.
So an aged gin,
Yes.
versatile in cocktails as well as like a London dry style? Or?
It's really wonderful. We like gin and tonics. It's really wonderful in a gin and tonic. It gives it a very special flavor.
Yeah, any gin cocktail, Negroni, it just is all delicious.
That's right.
If you start with delicious ingredients, more than likely you will have a delicious cocktail. And always pay attention to your ice.
Yeah, good ice.
You know, probably my favorite of all the stuff that you do is the 8-year rye. And I think we were talking recently about how you have to be really patient
That's
as
right.
a distiller to make something that's going to age that long.
That's right. The 8-year-old rye spent 2 years in new American oak, and then I transferred in to use Cognac barrels. And yeah, patience and perseverance and a little procrastination goes a long way.
Well, it sure pays off, I'll tell you that. Listen, I want to give you guys time to talk about your YouTube site, which you just launched, and maybe any other things you want to tell us about how to buy your products or how to find you.
Oh, thank you so much. We are happy to say we can sell directly to consumers as of this February in California and Kentucky. We have a buy now button that will very soonly be up and running.
On our website?
mendocinospirits.com. And we just released this last Wednesday our Mendocino Spirits YouTube page, where you can find a 4-minute video of Crispin explaining the Charente method of distillation, of which he is very proficient. And we had a super launch, and we're so grateful to all the people that participated and played with us and made our video get almost 500 views in 2 days.
Oh.
So we're small town folks that are really excited about that. You can buy locally here in lots of different stores, Redwood Valley Market, over on the coast, Harvest Market, Mendoza's, but Southside store, Talmadge store, support local stores.
Can they find retailers on your website?
There's some retailers on our website, and we're going to continue to update that as we get them.
Okay.
Yeah, there's
Well,
a number of them.
I wish you guys could hang out a lot longer and talk about this wonderful stuff, but
Yeah.
we got to move on.
Yes.
So thank you guys for being here tonight. Hang with me for just a second. I want to introduce our second testimonial, and that is by local realtor Tanya Gilmore, a rising star in the local realty world. She was also a charter board member of the Greater Ukiah Business and Tourism Alliance, and is a strong advocate for downtown business.
Maya Angelou once said, "You can't really know where you're going unless you know where you've been." And that really rings true in a small community like ours. That's why it's so
I'll introduce
important
the
that we
next
have a place
video,
that
and then
preserves
we'll
our history,
take
like the Grace Hudson Museum. Our community is growing and expanding every day, and as new people move to our area, it is vital that we have a place that tells our story and preserves our history so that we all know where we're headed together.
Okay, I want to introduce the second of our 3 short videos that feature the life and work of our 3 artists in 30 Years On. This one is about Sculptor Mac Magruder. In addition to being a superb artist, Mac and his family are in the business of cattle and sheep ranching. The Inglehaven Ranch in Potter Valley has been in the family for multiple generations. And immediately after the video, Mac's going to join me to talk a little bit about his art and the role ranching has played in his artistic life.
Clay is a flexible medium, which Mac Magruder has used to create fantastical sculptures, but it is also fragile. Ranching is part of his family heritage, but is also a heavy responsibility. The tensions of trying to balance both are at the center of Mac's art and life. Raised on a ranch in Potter Valley, Mac first began throwing clay at the suggestion of a friend while studying veterinary science at college. Mac created Leftovers Nightmare years later using his wheel-throwing skills to make all the bowls and plates. As you see, Mac later began to look at clay more for its sculptural potential than its functional capabilities. After completing a Bachelor of Arts at Humboldt State, Mac was accepted to the prestigious Master of Fine Arts program in sculpture at the University of Washington in Seattle. After his first year in the program, Mac's father contracted cancer. Mac returned home to help manage the family ranch, but continued to work on his art. When his father improved, he returned to Seattle to finish the program. He created this sculpture for his MFA thesis show, using a mold from a taxidermy form to create the deer's head. He also airbrushed this piece, a technique which allowed for greater nuance and control. As the program and faculty were nationally recognized, Mac received invitations to show his work in galleries and museums around the country. Most notably, his work was included in a group show, Clay Roots, at the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art in 1981. When his father's condition worsened, Mac returned home to run the ranch, implementing new practices that were better for the environment and animals. Mac did not give up on his art, though. He often woke early to care for the livestock before working on his art, which often reflected issues related to ranching and land stewardship. He also taught at Mendocino College to stay involved with the arts community. In this self-portrait, called Big Mac, his body becomes whittled down within his overalls as he struggles to balance his work on the ranch with creating art. Many of his pieces also reflect what was happening around him. In War of the Wills, Mac embodies the war against marijuana. At the time, Mac watched as helicopters flew over farmland looking for grows and saw his friends and neighbors raided and busted for cultivating cannabis. The figure's head is a law enforcement helicopter, while its body is enveloped by a marijuana plant, legs rooted in planters. Men Without a Totem addresses the redwood summer of 1990, when people from across the country came to Mendocino County to protest the logging industry. Here our logger has lost his reason for being, hollow and headless. Frequently frustrated by the bottom heaviness of ceramics, Mac used a metal pipe on the inside of this piece, Tornado, to allow the clay to swirl upwards in the form of a bowl-shaped tornado. He used the same technique for Navajo Nightmare. Here, a Navajo churro sheep falls victim to a leopard circling below. For the beast within, Mac used a metal armature to support the deer, allowing it to become a wall-hanging piece. On the body of the docile deer, he painted a prowling predator. Mac has always had a long-standing goal to sculpt more with other materials. In several of the pieces you've seen, he incorporated metal and wood. This piece, Manzanita, is entirely without clay. Designed as an award for a doctor in a rural healthcare program, Mac pieced together Manzanita he found on his property to create the snake curling around a crutch in the form of a medical symbol. In his latest artwork, Mac has continued to explore other materials. In Run of the River, ceramic fish swim through the prongs of a pitchfork, suspended over a dried river bed. The piece fishes for a reasonable dialogue about our relationship to the environment and the needs of both wildlife and humans, especially as water becomes more scarce in Northern California. In mixing up the elements, Mac used metal to reflect on fire season. Museum visitors can turn the handle of these vintage-inspired egg beaters, driving the wind that makes wildfires especially dangerous. Instead of a typical handle, the egg beaters are topped with fiery devil horns, while the airplane drops borate to put out the flames below. Today, Mac continues trying to balance his work on the ranch with making art, whimsical sculptures that explore deeper issues.
And I'm joined by Mac Magruder. Mac, we learned a little bit about when you started to throw clay in college, but let's go back a little further in your life. What attracted you to art, and what were your first experiences with art?
Well, that's it. I had a late start with art, and I am a typical ranch boy. I was raised hunting, fishing, doing everything. Art was not. My parents didn't sing. I had no exposure to art at all. So in high school, I signed up for an art class, and the teacher's name was Mrs. Soar, which is ironic because my first semester I got an A, second quarter I got an A, third quarter I got an A, and the fourth quarter when we were cutting snowflakes out, I got an F. So Mrs. Soar averaged an A and an F out to an F. And I remember standing out in the hallway as I got an F in art for the whole semester, thinking that this would probably change my life. And so my father, to get me on the straight and narrow, sent me to a military academy. And the military academy was in Marin County in the late 60s, and he sent me to get straight, to be, to shape up. And there was nothing in Marin County in the late 60s that was straight. And that atmosphere and my exposure to that environment clinched me on free thinking. And so I went to college as a pre-vet major, got interested in a friend that was doing clay, and I was fascinated with clay, and I would sit in on his classes and not even signed up for the class and just start fiddling around with clay. And I did that. I really got fascinated with that, and at one point the instructor came by and said, you could be really good at this if you focus on it. And that right there was enough for me to not look back. And I transferred to University of Colorado as an art major, got a BFA from Humboldt State in art, and then got an MFA from University of Washington in art. And so that one instructor at that particular time, when I was very kind of wondering what I was going to do, changed my life.
Failing at snowflakes, but succeeding at clay.
Yeah, well, I had probably a bit of an attitude problem at that time, and she was really a good teacher. I don't want to, and if there's any relatives of Mrs. Soar around, I don't want to degrade her because I had an attitude. But we did have a problem with making snowflakes.
Mac, I want to ask you, we only have a few seconds here, so I don't know if you'll be able to cover it, but I mentioned in the introduction that you're a working rancher. So I'm wondering how you feel that's influenced your art, and are there times when you feel it's been an impediment to being an artist?
Well, it's constantly been a conflict to try to have time to do your artwork and also run a ranch is crazy. And I was showing a lot in graduate school, and I committed myself to shows at home here, and I just tried to figure out how to do them. And so it kind of wore me down. And some of my pieces represent that. There's a couple of pieces that I'm getting kind of whittled down in. So the ranch has a great deal to do with my art.
And I want to say, if people come down to the museum and see the exhibition and read the labels, they'll get a better sense of that as well.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to move on. You're going to join us in a little later in the show.
Yep.
But for now, ladies and gentlemen, once again, here's Clay Hawkins.
All right, here's a song I wrote when I first moved here. It's about living in Mendocino. Where the cracks in my hands songs like the cracks in the land tell the story of living you won't understand until you planted your dreams with a woman who stands by your side. It's not in the schools, it's taught with the tools, and the worth of a day is in the work that you do. Rise with the sun every day, it's winding its way through the sky. When you're living by the stone and the kettle over the fire, with our bones we settled our home, and together we get by. And everybody pulls their weight. Well, it starts with a seed. You raise what you need, and if the rain doesn't come, you got to believe, 'cause it can come any day and wash you away just as easy. But when the harvest is good, 'cause you've done what you could, it's a gift you've been given, and that's understood. You gotta give it away, 'cause that's how you're gonna keep it. When you're living by the stone and the kettle over the fire, with our bones we settled our home, and together we get by. And everybody pulls their when you're living by the stone and the kettle over the fire, with our bones we settled our home, and together we get by. And everybody pulls their weight.
Hey, Clay.
How you doing?
That was great. How are you doing?
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks again for being with us
Thanks
tonight.
for having me tonight.
Hey, I just want to ask you a couple of questions. When did music first speak to you? How young were you? How old were you when that happened?
I was actually I remember I was 3 years old when I told my parents I wanted to be a singer. And I would learn country songs. I grew up in this household with mostly country music, and I didn't know any of the words. I didn't know what any of it meant. Like, I would think of, like, I remember a song, it was like, "Don't take it, love for granted," and I thought it was "Don't take love from Granny." And I would sing songs like that at 3 or 4 and just make up the words however. And then, but I got into the guitar when I was about 14, and gosh, I never looked back. I've just been playing ever since, pretty much. Going on.
You never had to be forced to play, you just did it.
No, yeah, I just, you know, my grandmother had a guitar, and I remember it was always seemed magical to me. I didn't know what to do with it. And then a friend of mine in junior high, he was a guitar player. And he talked me into, he said, "Get a bass and we'll be in a band." So I went down to the guitar store, and I didn't know anything about guitars or basses or the difference or anything. And I bought a guitar. And I went back, and he was like, "Yeah, you got a guitar, like you're supposed to get a bass, you know, we need a band." I was like, "I don't know, I'm gonna play the guitar." And then that was that, yeah. And my mom was very cool. She just, "Go for it. I know where you are." At high school, she loved it. She was like, "You're in your room practicing, like it's perfect."
All right.
So.
Well, growing up as a musician, who were your influences? What were your influences?
And everybody from like early, I mean, all the big guitar heroes. I kind of went through
time studying at the altar of everybody from Jimmy Page to Hendrix to Leo Kottke. Once I started getting into fingerstyle, I started looking at banjos. I couldn't figure out how to learn fingerstyle guitar because when I was trying to figure it out 20-something years ago, you couldn't just be like, hey, how does Leo Kottke do what he does? All the guitar teachers I knew would be like, I don't know, man. You ask him. It's Leo Kottke. I don't know how he does what he does, you know? And so the only thing I could figure out was banjo players. I was like, well, those guys are playing with their fingers. So I learned banjo rolls. And then I went from there and just started applying it to the guitar and like watching people and flamenco. I was paying attention a lot to those guys because they have a lot of right hand technique and stuff like that. So, yeah.
The song you just played for us, what's the name of it?
It's called The Stone in the Kettle.
Stone in the Kettle. It's a beautiful song. I know when we were chatting a week or so ago, I mentioned that one of the themes of tonight's show is community, and that song immediately popped into your head.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about what inspired you?
I got here, I moved up here from San Francisco. I was born and raised in Arizona on a ranch, so I was used to rural life, but I kind of like went off to the big city and to kind of make my fame and fortune, so to speak, and bounced around between LA and San Francisco and New Orleans and whatnot. And I finally landed in Mendocino. And it all kind of came back to me. It was like, oh yeah, you know, you get up, you work, you're outside. You know, I'd kind of like been living in cities and computers and that whole thing for so long. So I just started thinking about kind of what the experience of everybody pulls their weight up here. That's the thing that I learned about coming up to the country is that you need your neighbor, and it's not like a city where you can get away without knowing your neighbor. You need to know your neighbor in the country, and I thought that was a really powerful kind of perspective gain, I guess.
Indeed. Well, thank you again. Clay's going to be back at the very end of our show, and what we're going to go to in a minute is the video about Wayne Knight, the third artist in the current exhibition at the museum. 30 years on, Lydon, Magruder, and Knight. Wayne passed away in 2009 from H1N1 virus, otherwise known as the swine flu. He left both a lasting legacy as a painter, graphic artist, and teacher, and also an indelible impression in the hearts of the greater Ukiah community. Mac Magruder will join me after that video to talk a little bit about Wayne, but before we do that, here's a word from Pomo artist and educator, Mio Marufo.
Hi, my name is Mio Marufo, and I'm a member of the Robinson Rancheria Band of Pomo Indians. And I wanted to tell you what the Grace Hudson Museum means to me. Here at the Wild Gardens, you can see the 5 biomes of Pomo country through the grasslands, the oak woodlands, and the forests that have been made here to learn about the plants and the foods that we gathered and lived with. So please come visit us, and also please make a donation to the Grace Hudson Museum. Thank you.
Wayne Knight taught his students that in order to become an artist, you need training, direction, and dedication. That's the way he lived his life. Raised in Southern California, Wayne taught himself to draw as a kid. Later, he received a Bachelor of Arts from UCLA and Master of Arts from San Francisco State. This painting of his first wife, Mary, shows the influence of his professor, Richard Diebenkorn, with its abstract approach to the figure. After the birth of their son, Wayne and Mary left Southern California. They headed north to join the Back to Land movement. In 1976, they built a cabin on Black Bart Trail, a remote area above Redwood Valley. After settling into life on the homestead, Wayne resumed painting regularly. He was always drawn to portraiture, appreciating the historical significance of the genre. He painted this image of his high school-age son Matisse around 1990. With a young family, Wayne began teaching painting at Mendocino College, where he was beloved by his students. He also designed materials for local organizations, like the Ukiah Players Theater and his wife's ballet studio, the Mendocino Ballet. Eventually, his graphics experience would lead him to become art director for 6 years at SoftMed, a company based in Sacramento. Wayne used his graphic design skills to secure a tenure-track position at Humboldt State University. He quickly set about modernizing the graphics department by developing a state-of-the-art lab while encouraging his students. He taught them to use good design to spread a message. Here are some examples of his work. Throughout it all, painting was an integral part of Wayne's life. He typically woke up at 4 a.m. to work on portraits in his studio. He created the Constituents in 1985 to represent the diverse peoples of Mendocino County, with Ukiah Valley in the background. Pictured from left to right are Superior Court Judge Arthur B. Broaddus, Pomo Indian High School student and dancer Clinton Grant, Potter Valley rancher and artist Mac Magruder, ballet dancer Marion Adams, Ukiah High School receptionist and Native American Club advisor Perlene Hernandez, 104-year-old Martha Cook, local businesswoman Kathy Stewart, and old-timer Mark Walker. While Wayne sometimes painted people he knew, he also created his own characters. The subject of this painting remains a mystery. In 1995, Wayne's art took a turn with a journey to Cambodia. There he worked with the Cambodian Defenders Project, an NGO dedicated to human rights. To fund his trip, Wayne pre-sold paintings that he would create during his time abroad. Hugh McAvoy paid a monthly fee to Wayne. When Wayne returned, Hugh selected this piece entitled The Appeal No. 2 to take home. It was featured in the Grace Hudson Museum exhibit, Color Clay in Cambodia, in 1996. Away from his homestead studio and familiar routine, Wayne needed to adjust. He began to paint more quickly, with more expressive brushstrokes, and in a smaller format. He also experimented with landscapes for the first time. When he returned to California, Wayne continued to paint landscapes, including this image of Black Bart Trail. This landscape series was inspired by real places, but Wayne painted them using his memory and imagination. Still, Wayne was continually drawn to portraiture. In 2009, shortly after achieving tenure at Humboldt State, Wayne contracted H1N1 swine flu and passed suddenly. He never finished this painting entitled Despair. He intended to pair it with another painting, his last finished work of art, called Hope.
And I'm joined once again by Mac Magruder. And I want to say that we're sitting in front of 3 paintings that Wayne Knight, they're Wayne Knight paintings that were provided to us by Karen Christofferson, who I want to give a shout out to for helping us organize the Wayne Knight version, the section of the new Leyden Magruder Knight exhibition. Mac, you and Tom Leyden spent a lot of time with Wayne, especially like in the 1990s. Tell us about that time you spent with him, what Wayne meant to you guys, and what he meant to the community.
Well, one thing I think is Wayne's paintings are very, very powerful. And they're, when you go to the gallery and see his paintings, he is there. I mean, I can't look at a painting and knowing him, he is part. It's his ego, the way he holds himself is in his paintings, and I think that's really a unique ability to do that. And we miss him. Tom and I would go to San Francisco and have go to galleries and have great discussions. And Wayne and I approached the teaching of art a little differently. I'm always very loose and kind of I'm not real regimented in my approach to teaching. Wayne, on the other hand, was when you walked into the class, you sat down, the door shut. If it was an 8 o'clock class, the door shut at 8:05. Nobody came in, nobody talked, and he got great results. It was just a different, so we had a little different idea of how to teach. And I at one point said I was going to bring a chainsaw artist in to do some demonstration, and he was so offended that I would ever take, not offense to anybody that does chainsaw art, but he didn't think that was fine art. And so I was always interested in the process, and he was interested in the fundamental structure of teaching, and you had to go by the basics. And is, ironically, Mary Knight, his wife then, taught ballet, and she was very structured in her approach to life. And their son Matisse absorbed all that and went to West Point. So I guess I always think that's ironic, but if you know him, I think it's very telling.
Now, you didn't. What was your last memory of Wayne?
Well, he stopped drinking, and I always kind of laughing to myself that he was much more fun when he was drinking, because he did get a little serious sometimes. But you know, I don't think I have a particular last memory of him. It's we spent a lot of time in the car together, talking, at restaurants, eating. He loved good food, and then he was gone. And he got the job of his dreams, being tenured at Humboldt State, and then it was over. And that, I guess, the preciousness of life, you never know.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing your memories of Wayne.
Yeah.
Really appreciate that, Mac. Thanks for your art. We have the next to last word of the evening is going to go to City of Ukiah Mayor Juan Orozco.
Hi, I'm Juan Orozco, currently the mayor for the City of Ukiah in 2021. I'm here to tell you why it is important and necessary to have museums such as our Grace Hudson Museum here in Ukiah. Museums are safe places for treasures, but mainly they record what would be lost otherwise. We trust these facilities to take care of our precious artifacts, which as a nation we collectively own. In other words, a museum plays a vital custodial role for preserving our history. Not only do these places keep important historical documentation, but in most cases, they are the only place to keep items where staff and museum curators are trained and have the equipment to keep them safe for our future generations. I invite you to become a member and or sponsor of our Grace Hudson Museum here in Ukiah. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. As we wrap up the show tonight, I'd like to stop and take a moment to acknowledge the original caretakers of the land that we live on. The Grace Hudson Museum and the City of Ukiah are on the traditional homelands of the Pomo people. And I think it's important to recognize that. And from wherever you are viewing this program, we really encourage you to learn about the native peoples who lived here before us. And with that, I would like to thank once again our sponsors, the Eversole family, Savings Bank of Mendocino County, Fuller Digital Media, Dave's Bike Shop, and the City of Adventist Health of Ukiah Valley, and the City of Ukiah. And a special thanks to Kirk Fuller for directing our program tonight and for all his technical support. Thank you to all our guest artists and our museum supporters. Please think about giving to the Grace Hudson Museum by phone, by mail, or by our website. We wish you a very good evening and thank you for watching. And now we're going to take us out is Clay Hawkins on the guitar.